Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here, and in this video I'll be giving you my review on the first part of patch 2.5 for Final Fantasy XIV. Now while we still have the Gold Saucer, the final Zodiac quest, and the second part of the main story still to come before the expansion, I want to review the content from the first part of this patch. So, let's begin. First, let's kick it off with reviewing the first part of the main story from this patch. Now, I've loved the evolution of the main story of Final Fantasy XIV ever since it began shaping itself, even back in 1.0. However, patch 2.5 story takes it to another level when compared to most of the relaunch's story before it. It tugs at the heartstrings and it begins working towards closure on some things. We've been opening so many doors with the story that it's nice to finally be getting some closure or some actual progress towards answers at the very least. It even ends with a fun fight that again shows us Square Enix might have a few new mechanical tricks up their sleeve come expansion time. It might only be the first half of what's to come, but it was by far the most exciting story since the game's relaunch, at least for me. For that, I give part 1 story aspect a 10 out of 10. Now while we're on the topic of story, we may as well cover our good old boy Hildy. The Hildebrand storyline has seen mixed reactions from the community, but I've always loved the light humor amidst all the world-ending shenanigans. This patch not only brought closure to Hildebrand's first big case, but did so in a way that kept me laughing and smiling the whole way through. Some killer vanity rewards, an awesome story, and a fun rematch, as well as me dreaming of a new flying mount. With all that in mind, Hildebrand also gets a 10 out of 10 from me. So while we're praising the story aspects of this patch, we really need to talk more about the battle-oriented content. So first off, let's tackle the World of Darkness. Now as the finale to the Crystal Tower story arc, we expected it to be epic, and for the most part, it didn't disappoint. The story is fun to follow, especially when drawing comparisons to Final Fantasy III. The dungeon itself is massive with excellent attention to detail, the music's a pleasure to listen to, and these are in my opinion the best bosses they've done since Labyrinth of the Ancients. Bosses here are far more interesting in their mechanics than they were in the Circus Tower. They aren't super threatening, but every player does need to watch out for themselves or it can be quite easy to get killed. Cerberus, I'm looking at you. The trash enemies are dull as ever, didn't expect much out of those, though the Atomos trash here is at least interesting conceptually in the way that it is implemented. I'm curious to see if they ever do anything like that for an actual boss. Overall, it was a great conclusion to the World of Darkness, though it does have a few dull points. I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10. Next up, we have Earth's Fount, the primal battle against Odin. For ages now, players have been asking for an 8-man version of the primal so we could really appreciate him more than we can during the Fate. When the fight debuted at the fan festival, with words of a harder version being added to the game later, we were hopeful our encounter with the Dark Divinity would be epic. Unfortunately, while the fight is definitely fun and can be used to really teach players the basics of dodging and healing and using your defensive cooldowns and whatnot, it still only presents a moderate challenge level. It's definitely not an extreme primal, closer in difficulty to Ultima's Bane than any of the extreme primals. And the rewards are all vanity gear. While it's great to have this gear for that purpose, it's super lame that that's all it's good for. Cool fight, but I'm going to give Odin a 6 out of 10 on the grounds that it really fails to be epic and has very low replayability. Before going on to the hard mode dungeons, let's quickly touch on the Gilgamesh Rematch fight from the Hildebrand storyline. This, like Ultros and Typhon before it, was a fun fight that tugs at Final Fantasy lovers' nostalgia strings. Awesome music, fun fight, and a fun little vanity reward. Unlike Odin, this was kind of what our expectation was for our buddy Greg, and I'm glad he had a fun way of signing off for now. However, like other vanity reward oriented fights, it faces the issue of low replayability. So for the battle at Big Keep, I'm giving the fight a 7 out of 10, shedding some points for just being unnecessarily long. So when it comes to Pve Battle content, I'm going to leave out the main story trial and jump right into our last topic, the hard mode dungeons. I was originally going to give each dungeon their own section, but other than a few details, I give them all pretty much the same score. I love the music, the details of the dungeon, and the overall uniqueness of these dungeons, at least when compared to some of the expert dungeons that came before it. The bosses were all quite simple, but they at least tried to show off new ideas not yet utilized in other aspects of the game. The final bosses of each dungeon all felt like really well done fights. Overall, they were pretty much on par or slightly above the average set by the prior dungeons, so for that, I give them each an 8. Now if I had to rate one lower than the rest, it'd probably be Keeper of the Lake, which other than its story elements, did not impress me nearly as much as the other two. This one I'd give a 6. The next thing we'll grade is the new PvP mode, Borderland Ruins Slaughter. This PvP rule set turns the Borderland Ruins into a giant deathmatch with some buff-giving PvE objectives as well. There's not much to say other than it's a ton of fun to play, at least for me, more so when you're playing a tank or a caster DPS really. Even after a few small changes, black mages and summoners really shine here, with bards not too far behind, but it always feels good to be a part of the slaughter. I'll give this edition an 8 out of 10, though I hope once we have some new maps, people will return to play secure a bit more often. Last but not least, there were a ton of quality of life changes and additions to other aspects of the game. Now I'd like to rate them all individually, but we'd be here the length of a Mr. Happy video in order to do that, so here's a brief overview. New crafting and gathering tools barely seem to make a difference. The ethereal wheel was a total letdown. The post-Moogle quests are always welcome to introduce more lore into the game. The nerfs to the Animus, Novus, and Nexus steps of the Zodiac questline are all awesome for latecomers to the weapon grind. The hunt is even more toxic than it was back in 2.3, and all the quality of life changes are, well, always welcome. I'd say other additions and changes get a solid 8 out of 10. And that brings us to the final score. Now you'd think I'd just average everything out to get this number, but I think it's important to gauge the level of fun I'm having with this patch. Overall, it's a fun patch. World of Darkness and Slaughter are enough to keep me going for hours on top of the content added in patch 2.4. While I think some things definitely could have been done better, the story content, fun fights, and progression for alternate jobs makes it easy to get caught up in trying new roles while doing all the new content. Overall, I'd say this is a good patch, an 8 out of 10. And I'm looking forward to reviewing the remaining content in February and March, especially the Gold Saucer. Thank you for watching this video. Be sure to give me your scores in the comment section of the video below. Be sure to like, favorite, subscribe, and share, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Until then, take care.